There exists a special kind of person in this world. Someone who walks through the busy city streets and feels an inexplicable peace. Someone who returns home at the end of the day and upon closing the door, doesn't feel the weight of silence, but rather a welcoming embrace. These people don't run from solitude. They don't desperately fill their schedules to avoid being alone. They don't check their phones every minute seeking constant validation. No, these people have found something that many spend their entire lives searching for, the ability to be well with themselves. But what makes these people so different? What exists within their minds that allows them to embrace solitude while so many others avoid it intensely? The answer doesn't lie in emotional coldness or pathological isolation. It lies in something much deeper, something that reveals one of the most fundamental truths about human nature and what it means to be truly alive. When we are born, our first experience is one of absolute connection. We are united with our mother, dependent on her for every aspect of our survival. And as we grow, we are taught that belonging is everything, that we need friends, approval, to always be surrounded by others to be complete. Modern society has amplified this in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. We have thousands of virtual connections, constant notifications, the ability to never be truly alone. And yet, paradoxically, we live in the era of the greatest collective loneliness humanity has ever known. But these people who don't fear solitude have understood something essential. They've realized that there is a fundamental difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Solitude is a physical, objective state. It's simply the absence of other people around you. But feeling lonely is an emotional, subjective state. It's possible to be in a crowded stadium with thousands of people and feel crushing loneliness. And it's equally possible to be in a mountain cabin, completely alone, and feel a deep and satisfying fullness. Science shows us that the brains of these people function slightly differently. Neuroimaging studies reveal that individuals comfortable with solitude show increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, the region associated with self-reflection and introspective thinking. Their brains don't fire threat alarms when they're alone. Instead, they enter a state that neuroscientists call the default mode network, a state of internal contemplation where creativity flourishes and profound insights emerge. But it's not just about biology. The psychology of these people reveals something even more interesting. They've developed what psychologists call differentiation of self. This means they have a clear sense of who they are, independent of others' opinions. Their self-esteem isn't a thermometer that rises and falls based on likes, approval, or external validation. It's a solid foundation built upon genuine self-acceptance and deep self-knowledge. These people have learned to become their own best friends. And this isn't an empty cliché. It's a real and measurable psychological skill. They've developed what is known as self-compassion, a concept extensively explored by researcher Kristin Neff. Self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness, care, and understanding that you would offer a good friend. When they make mistakes, they don't criticize themselves excessively harshly. When they face difficulties, they don't isolate themselves in shame. Instead, they recognize that imperfection and difficulties are universal parts of the human experience. Subscribe to the channel and comment what time you're watching this. Is it late at night, looking for something to calm your mind? Or perhaps early in the morning, before the world wakes up? Share this moment with us. Returning to our journey, we need to understand that these people weren't born this way. They didn't come into the world with a special solitude gene. Many of them, in fact, struggled intensely with fear of abandonment, social anxiety, or the need for constant approval. What changed wasn't who they were, but how they learned to relate to themselves. There's a fascinating concept in existential psychology called the capacity to be alone, introduced by psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott. He observed that babies develop this capacity through a paradoxical experience. They learn to be alone in the presence of someone. When a mother or caregiver is present but not intrusive, not constantly stimulating or demanding attention, the child learns that it's safe to be in their own internal world. They learn they don't need to be constantly engaged with others to be safe. And this lesson, when well learned in childhood, becomes the foundation for a healthy relationship with solitude in adult life. But even those who didn't have this experience in childhood can develop this capacity later. Through something that our modern culture often underestimates: deliberate practice of being alone. These people who don't fear solitude don't avoid being alone. They actively seek moments of solitude. They understand that, just as a muscle needs to be exercised to become strong, the capacity to be well alone needs to be cultivated. When you're alone, truly alone, something remarkable happens. The masks we wear in society begin to fall. The character we play at work, the edited version of ourselves we present on social media, the role we perform in our relationships, all of this dissolves. And what remains is you, in your most essential and raw form. For many people, this encounter with the authentic self can be uncomfortable. It's like looking in the mirror and discovering aspects of yourself you didn't know. But for those who don't fear solitude, this is a moment of profound honesty and freedom. They don't need to impress anyone. They don't need to be funny, interesting, productive, or anything else. They can simply be. And in this space of non-performance, of non-judgment, something magical happens. They begin to truly know themselves. Eastern philosophy has recognized the value of solitude for millennia. Buddhist monks practice meditation in isolation, not because they are antisocial, but because they understand that true wisdom emerges from inner silence. Taoist sages sought remote mountains not to escape the world, but to find the world within themselves. They knew that you cannot truly know others until you know yourself. And you cannot truly know yourself in the constant noise of social interaction. In the West, we also have our own tradition of valuing solitude. Henry David Thoreau went to Walden Pond and wrote, "I never found a companion as companionable as solitude." The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about the necessity of periods of isolation so that great thoughts can emerge. Carl Jung developed the concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, and he emphasized that this requires time alone, exploring the depths of the unconscious. These people who don't fear being alone have understood something that the culture of constant noise tries to make us forget. Creativity, insight, and personal growth require internal space. When your mind is constantly processing external stimuli, conversations, notifications, demands from others, there's no space for your own deepest thoughts to emerge. It's like trying to hear a soft melody at a loud party. It's simply not possible. But there's another crucial aspect of these people that needs to be explored: their relationship with relationships. There's a common misconception that people comfortable with solitude are cold, distant, or incapable of intimacy. The truth is exactly the opposite. People who don't need others tend to have the healthiest and most satisfying relationships. But because they choose to be with others, they don't need to be with others. There's an enormous difference between these two states. When you desperately need other people to feel complete, you bring to your relationships an energy of neediness. You seek in others something that can only come from within you: validation, sense of worth, purpose. And this creates a toxic dynamic where you will inevitably be disappointed, because no human being can fill the existential void within another person. It's an impossible job. But when you're well alone, when you've cultivated a rich and satisfying relationship with yourself, you come to relationships from a place of abundance, not scarcity. You don't need the other person to complete you because you're already whole. You choose to share your life with someone not because you're afraid of being alone, but because you genuinely appreciate that person's presence and want to create something together. This is the difference between relationships based on need and relationships based on free choice. The former are prisons disguised as love. The latter are true partnerships between two complete people. Modern psychology has a term for this: healthy interdependence. It's different from dependence, where you can't function without the other person, and it's different from extreme independence, where you don't let anyone in. Interdependence means you're capable of being alone and also capable of being deeply connected. You can take care of yourself, and you can also allow others to care for you. You have deep roots in yourself, but you can also extend branches to connect with others. These people who don't fear solitude have developed what psychologist Abraham Maslow would call self-actualization. They're not stuck at the lower levels of the hierarchy of needs, constantly seeking external security or social approval. They've reached a point where they can focus on personal growth, creativity, the search for meaning, and the realization of their unique potential. And curiously, when you're no longer desperate for connection, when you can genuinely be well alone, that's exactly when you become most attractive to others. There's something magnetic about a person who doesn't need you but chooses to be with you. Solitude also offers something that our era of constant distraction has stolen from many: the capacity to process deep emotions. When something difficult happens, our first reaction is usually to seek distraction. We grab our phones, turn on the television, go out with friends, anything to avoid feeling the discomfort. But unprocessed emotions don't disappear. They accumulate in the subconscious, potentially contributing to anxiety and other emotional challenges over time. People comfortable with solitude have learned to sit with their emotions. When they're sad, they allow themselves to feel the sadness completely, without judgment or rush to make it disappear. When they're angry, they explore the anger, understand its origin, learn from it. This capacity to be present with all of your emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, is a form of emotional maturity that many adults never develop. And it's precisely in moments of solitude that this emotional alchemy can occur. There's also a spiritual dimension to solitude that cannot be ignored. All great spiritual traditions emphasize the importance of time alone for spiritual development. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. Buddha meditated alone under the Bodhi tree. Muhammad received revelations in isolation. This is no coincidence. There's something about solitude that opens doors to deeper dimensions of human experience. In solitude, when the noise of the outer world diminishes, you can hear more subtle voices. Intuitions that are constantly muffled by noise. Insights about your life and your path that can't compete with the cacophony of external opinions. A connection with something greater than you, whatever you want to call it. The universe, collective consciousness, the divine. These people who don't fear being alone frequently report experiences of profound peace, of feeling connected to something infinitely greater than their small individual ego. But let's be honest about something important. Being comfortable alone doesn't mean never feeling lonely. Even the most self-sufficient and internally rich people sometimes miss human connection. This isn't weakness. It's humanity. We are, after all, social creatures. We evolved in tribes, in communities. The need for belonging is coded in our DNA. What differentiates these people isn't the absence of desire for connection, but the capacity to not be controlled by that desire. They can miss company without panicking. They can desire connection without becoming desperate for it. There's a peace that comes from this capacity. A peace that many people spend their entire lives seeking outside themselves, when all along it was waiting inside them. It's the peace of knowing you'll be okay, whatever happens. That even if everyone leaves, even if you lose everything, you'll still have you. And that, these people discover, is enough. Not because they're superior or enlightened, but because they've learned a simple but profound truth. The most important relationship you'll have in life is the relationship with yourself. Think about it. You are the only person you'll spend every moment of your life with. From birth until death, you'll be there, in every experience, in every thought, in every emotion. If you can't be well with yourself, if you constantly need external distractions to flee from your own company, this makes life much more challenging than it needs to be. People who don't fear solitude have inverted this dynamic. They've transformed themselves into interesting company. They've cultivated rich interior lives, full of curiosity, creativity, reflection. They've developed hobbies and interests they can explore alone. They've learned to appreciate beauty in silence, to find joy in simple moments. A cup of coffee in the morning, watching the sun rise. A walk in the park, paying attention to the sounds of birds. A book that opens new worlds of thought. These simple things become deeply satisfying when you're truly present, not running from them to the next distraction. And here's something fascinating that psychological research demonstrates. Time alone, genuine quality time alone, is correlated with practically all markers of psychological well-being. Greater creativity, better emotional regulation, more clarity about values and life goals, greater capacity for empathy. Yes, you read that correctly. Spending time alone actually increases your capacity to connect deeply with others. Because when you know and accept all aspects of yourself, including the most vulnerable parts, you develop the capacity to accept others in their totality as well. So what have we learned about these rare people who don't fear being alone? They're not superhuman. They don't possess some special genetic trait. What they possess is courage. The courage to face themselves with complete honesty. The courage to sit in silence and allow thoughts and feelings to arise without censorship. The courage to build a life that is authentic to them, even when this puts them out of tune with social expectations. The courage to choose quality over quantity in relationships, solitude over superficial company. And perhaps most importantly, they understand that solitude is where we find our true voice. In the constant noise of modern society, it's easy to confuse the voices of others with our own. We absorb opinions from all sides, from media, from family, from friends, from social networks. And at some point, we lose contact with what we really think, feel, believe. Solitude is the space where all these external voices diminish, and we can finally hear our own inner voice, whispering truths that have waited patiently to be heard. This isn't an easy journey. It requires emotional discipline, deep self-awareness, and willingness to face aspects of ourselves we'd prefer to ignore. But for those who embark on this journey, the rewards are immense. A sense of freedom that comes from no longer constantly needing others' approval. A depth of self-understanding that illuminates the path through life's inevitable difficulties. A capacity to love others more purely, because that love is a choice, not a desperate need. The psychology of people who don't fear being alone teaches us something vital about the human condition, that true strength isn't in never needing anyone, but in maintaining well-being even in the temporary absence of others. That true connection doesn't come from mutual dependence, but from the conscious choice of two complete people to share their journeys. That true peace isn't in a life without difficulties, but in a self strong enough to face any difficulty. In the end, perhaps the most important lesson is this. Learning to be well alone isn't preparing for a life of isolation. It's preparing for a life of genuine freedom. The freedom to be authentic. The freedom to make choices based on internal values, not on fear of rejection. The freedom to love without desperation. The freedom to live a life that is truly yours. And when you look at these rare people who walk through the world with this inner peace, this sense of fullness that doesn't depend on external circumstances, you realize they didn't find something that was hidden from the world. They simply found themselves. And in doing so, they found everything they truly needed. May the Lord God grant us all the wisdom to understand that, before we seek completeness in others, we must first find peace in our own company. May we have the courage to face solitude not as an enemy, but as a teacher. And may we, in learning to be well alone, paradoxically discover our deepest capacity to truly connect with others and with the divine.